Hey folks, David Stewart here. Hope you guys are having a fantastic day. Postmodern is old hat. I'm going to use that cliche. So the postmodern style and the postmodern ethos, most importantly, is very old and just very stupid at this point. This is my big point about postmodernism. People on Twitter want to talk about how offensive it is, how ugly it is, how it's money laundering. They had one where like, here's a painting that doesn't exist and it sold for some obscene amount of money. I'm like, this, what you should talk about is how incredibly unoriginal this was, because we already had a piano piece that was just silence from 1954. So all of the concepts that you see, like bananas on walls, this is decades old. It's as old as the baby boomers. The only difference is that very few people bothered to know about this stuff, or you only interacted with it at a distance. Like if you were going through the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art, you walk through that, you're like, why did I come in here? I guess this was on the tour schedule, but I don't see anything here I like. Or maybe you see like a student exhibit of art and you're like, man, these students here really suck at art. That's the postmodern ethos at work. What is it? Well, it's taking the modern to the next step. It is, rather than making new aesthetic systems with the modern, postmodern is about challenging the idea of what aesthetics are. It's there's a meta narrative to most postmodern art. So what about John Cage's, I think it's 3 minutes and 54 seconds, whatever it is, the piano piece that's silence. I can't remember its exact number. 4 minutes and 23 seconds? You guys tell me. You go Google it and tell me, because I'm forgetting the numbers for it. But anyway, the whole point is the piano player comes out, he opens up the piano, opens up the keyboard cover, and he sits there in silence. How is the silence music? No, John Cage has challenged you to think about is, what is music, right? Maybe you start to hear people coughing. You hear people like rustling their programs. You hear the air conditioner on. You hear people like adjusting in their seats. You hear people whispering and talking about what's going on. Then he closes it up and walks off. So it causes you to attend to other things around you that would normally not be considered the music, but which are part of the musical experience. That's the meta that I'm talking about. Now, John Cage approached a lot of his music with a lot of comedy. And I think this was true as well of his partner, who was a major postmodern dance guy, as well as his one-time wife, who was a postmodern sculptor back in like the 1940s. You have a certain amount of humor that you approach your work with. You do some silly things, like John Cage did one where he had like microphones attached to his mouth and came in, it was through a loudspeaker. We're like, what is this horrible noise? And they went and looked and found him like eating crackers with these microphones in his mouth. Or you might have an aquarium with staff paper behind it, and wherever the fish go, that's the notes you play on the piano. Things like that. So these things are ridiculous, and the early postmodernists didn't really have a strictly serious approach to them. It was more about challenging the idea of art, seeing what happened, having large amounts of randomness in the art was part of it, because that chance could produce something very unique, right? There's lots of things about the postmodern ethos that go into producing the art that you see. What ended up happening, though, is that once you get to that point where you're like, this art is about what is art. Okay, cool. I'm glad that you challenged me to think about the winding of the air conditioner as art. That's a cool statement. It's in 1954 now. Where do we go from here? And the answer is there's nowhere to go. After you tape Bananas to Walls, and this is, I only bring that one up because that one made a bunch of rounds a couple years ago on Twitter. And then someone was defending it like, well, getting you to talk about the banana on the wall is the art. It's like, yeah, but this is 7 decades old. They've been doing it for 70 years. Do something new, you unoriginal hacks. Okay, it's all been done before. I even did a piano piece that was like a play on John Cage, where the piano player opens up the keyboard and then gets a phone call about somebody dying, right? And so that was like the big joke, and everybody got it was a joke because everybody knew about John Cage that was in the audience. So it is one of those humorous things. It was very much in the spirit of what John Cage did, but that's a joke, right? It's like a little joke piece, and then you go have some real music that you're going to do with it. I remember having this conversation with a friend of mine named Bob Allaire, Robert Allaire, he's a film composer now. He's like, postmodern is done. I'm like, postmodern is not done, because nobody's done with it. And I I.M. fortunately was right. He was right in that it was artistically done. I was right in that it wasn't done. People were going to keep doing postmodern art, and they're still doing it 20 years later. That was 20 years ago. You know, that was 20 years ago. Me and him had that discussion. 20 years later, there's still no change. They're still selling garbage for money. I don't know, maybe it is money laundering, but the point is, like, it's now lost its humor too, is that artists take this kind of crap seriously. They're like, this toilet with this picture of Jesus in it is about blah blah blah, and they have like a whole essay about their dumb postmodern piece. Whereas a real postmodernist from like the 50s would have just been like, here's a toilet, that's my art. Have you ever thought about the aesthetics of the toilet and its curves? Right? That would be that's a real postmodern approach to a toilet. Is like, oh, I've never appreciated the beauty of a toilet before, right? Or it's the beauty of its function, that it takes my waste away from me, right? This is the fun way to approach postmodernism, but that's not what they do now. Now it's like, here's this crucifix in a jar of urine. Give me $10,000 for that, government, please. It's like, well, that's offensive to people. And what are you saying? I'm saying Christianity bad. It's like, okay. Real postmodernism would be inviting you to really think about the art of like the everyday. The can of soup. It's like, why is this a can of soup? So it makes you to think about the aesthetics of a can of soup. Have you ever considered the aesthetics of a can of soup? But once you do that, you're like, okay, I've considered the aesthetics of a can of soup. What's next? But they have nowhere to go. That's the big problem with postmodernism. We just don't have anywhere to go after that. So you have to think about what happens next. And believe it or not, there's been some styles that have evolved, at least in music. There's like minimalism. Minimalism evolved because really you couldn't do that much with postmodernism. A lot of the early electronic music, the beat boop electronic music like Morton Subotnick or whatever, that stuff evolved, or John Chowning, Musique Concrète stuff. That stuff evolved because you really had to think in new terms. And so it was a lot more radical than what you would get with like stuff on the radio. But it was original, right? And it ended up influencing popular things. If you listen to Aphex Twin, you're going to hear elements of Musique Concrète. Even though that's an old thing from like the 70s or 60s playing with tapes, you're going to hear Morton Subotnick elements. You're going to hear beat boop stuff from really old stuff that made its way into it. So it's not all just like, let me challenge what music is. They did that, moved on. Problem is there's nowhere to go, and visual art seems to be the worst sufferer for it. And as time goes on, the academy becomes less and less able to competently train artists. And I make that judgment based on my experience of seeing artists graduating from college and just observing their work. And it just doesn't have the technical skill that you would expect from an artist 40 or 50 years ago. Even the postmodernists would be able to sketch and draw and paint things in order to get their art degree, even if they were making statement pieces. They'd be able to do other things as well. Nowadays, it's mostly there's just a really low level of skill from what I see coming out of most areas of the academy. And of course, there's exceptional individuals that have great amounts of skill and technical prowess, but that's just what I see, is like the standards have gotten lower because you can appeal to this ethos. Well, I'm making my art about the question of what is art, and I'm going to make my art about the question of what is religion, and I'm going to make my art about the question of this, and I'm going to make this. I'm going to make this cow dung Virgin Mary thing. I'm going to have garbage glued to other garbage. Have you ever considered the aesthetics of garbage? Like, yes, we did that in the 1950s. Now it's time for us to try to sculpt things once again. Can we make something that's actually beautiful, that people look at and go, that's pretty, that's attractive, I want to look at it, I want to stare at it for a while. I don't see that at modern art museums too much, other than people like trying to pretend to understand art. I see that at places like the Getty, where there's classical art, there's Baroque art. You get to go in and look at giant paintings and observe the details therein, and get overwhelmed by beauty in old churches. That tends to be where, like, the art where people recognize this is beautiful, great art. That tends to be where it is, and not so much in the academy. Just what I've noticed. You, of course, can give me your opinions down below. I'm very interested to hear them about the postmodern, and really just that the postmodern is a very old, very played out ethos that just sticks around. Maybe, I don't know why. You tell me why it sticks around. Is it just that people have lost all ability to be original, or that we've become too splintered and individualistic? I don't know. So I'm always looking for more opinions on why this stupid Now it wasn't stupid when it started. It was kind of silly and fun, but why it has stuck around for the entire lifetime of the baby boomers. They will have lived their entire lives under the specter of postmodernism, and they will die under the specter of postmodernism. How awful is that? Anyway, leave me your thoughts. I would love to hear them. Don't forget, you can join my Patreon down below. There's a couple of payment options. You usually get a free book every month, as well as access to my live writes that I write. I write books live on the channel, so you can get the transcripts of those as well. Rotating book every month. Anyway, let me know, and I will see you all next time.